My biggest fear used to be that I was a psychopath because, I mean, being raised by a psychopath, I wondered if it's just hardwired in me.
Melissa Moore is the daughter of Keith Hunter Jefferson, also known as the Happy Face serial killer, convicted of murdering 8 women in the early 1990s.
Well, I think it's a life sentence. Whether people are fascinated with true crime or not, it's just going to be a life sentence for me.
She says growing up with a serial killer for her father was like living with 2 different men. One day a dad she knew and adored, and the next...
He killed and tortured animals in front of me, and that was something that was just kind of a standard, and people knew my dad did that. Yet I don't think they were educated to see that as a huge red flag. I don't think they liked it. I think it was just like, that's weird, but let's not talk about it.
Dr. Casey Jordan, a criminologist who has studied serial killers for over 30 years, says these criminals exhibit behaviors and give you clues to when they'll strike next.
With serial killers, they are killing their victims over time, usually with an emerging pattern that reveals a profile, a consistency, that you can actually identify variables that make their actions a bit more predictable. We call the serial killer trifecta, and there's 3 things that have been highly consistent with serial killers. Animal torture is number 1. There is no reason why any person with a healthy brain should be causing suffering of any living creature, be it animal or human. The other 2 signs are bedwetting, or enuresis we call it, that the child is being abused and the parents don't know about it. They very often wet their bed at night because they're having nightmares. The last thing is fire setting. That's a huge red flag for a child that has issues with power and control, because even the smallest child with a lighter or a match can take down an entire building.
So what makes up a serial killer? Clinical psychologist Dr. Krista Jordan is here to break it down.
They lack empathy, so they can't really imagine what it feels like to be in somebody else's shoes. And then they have some lifestyle behaviors. They're very stimulation seeking. They can tolerate high levels of arousal in the nervous system and feel kind of bored if something's not really redlining for them.
They're masters of deception. And so we were part of the dupe. We were part of the con. They used us as part of the con. I know my dad lured some of his victims by saying he was a family man.
There is an argument over whether a serial killer is born or raised. Many of the known serial killers today were severely abused and or abandoned as young children.
Everything that human beings can do is typically explained by what's called the biopsychosocial approach. So that means the biology, which is really the genetics. And there are some genes involved that predispose people to psychopathy. And of course, psychopathy predisposes you to being a serial killer. But then in addition to that, you need more than just the genetics. You also need to have adverse experiences in childhood. And the one that's the most predictive of psychopaths is maltreatment by the mother. We're wired to feel that bond is so incredibly fundamental to our survival. And then when that person, who is our number 1 priority in infancy, betrays us, I think it is just extremely stressful to the child.
Dr. Casey Jordan says there are 4 typologies of serial killers. The visionary killer, who usually suffers from a mental illness. Power control killers, who are in it for the power and to feed a deep insecurity. Hedonistic killers are in it for the thrill, or hedonistic comfort killers who kill for comforts like money. Mission-oriented killers who want to rid the world of a particular person or persons. Whether or not killers are born or raised, Dr. Casey Jordan says no one has learned more about serial killers than other serial killers.
They have evolved into a far more sophisticated type of killer. They watch CSI just like we do. They're highly intelligent. They know exactly what DNA is. They know how investigations are run. Even if it's the Hollywood version, it contains a lot of truth.
The likelihood of running into the projected 200+ serial killers in the US is very rare. Dr. Casey Jordan says who we should keep an eye out for hits closer to home.
We buy our pepper spray, we carry our keys, we take our self-defense classes and light our homes and put our locks. We get out of the car and look under it, and we get inside the house and we put our alarm on and we put down our keys and our pepper spray on the table, and then we sit on the sofa or get into bed with the person who is most likely to kill us. So you are always most likely to be killed by someone you know.
So what makes us normal people so obsessed with serial killers and true crime? Are we just all killers in waiting? Our experts agree. that could be a possibility.
It's almost as if the person consuming the true crime information is trying to study up so that they can avoid becoming a victim. We hear about atrocities 24/7. So I think people feel like the world has gotten to be a much more dangerous place. It hasn't, of course, if you talk to criminologists, but I think the perception is that the world is a much more dangerous place. Therefore, I need to do everything I can to avoid being victimized. And maybe if I learn about these people and how they operate, I can avoid becoming a victim.
We have to remember lives were lost at the hands of these individuals, many of which we'll never know.
But what disturbs me the most are killers, including serial killers, who target the most vulnerable of our population, which are children, very often the homeless, and sex workers. That the cases where the victims are the most vulnerable or where the crimes are the most disturbing, the ones against children, are the ones that you may not be aware of, and yet they are there, they do exist, and we can't just bury our heads under the sand and not face them.
In the case of Melissa Moore and so many other family members, their lives were also destroyed at the hands of serial killers.
Some are in shock and then some are angry, and we're all in the stages of grief at different times. So everybody has all these different rules about how you're supposed to grieve, and then judgments about how you're supposed to grieve. So it complicates a family structure for sure. I would say it fragments it.
After the recent death of her mother, Melissa decided to reconnect with her father for the first time in years.
I actually made the first reach out when I came home from burying my mom. I just wrote one sentence. I said, I'm ready to know why. Now I can decipher truth from the lies, and I can read it with a new filter. And so I was ready to hear whatever he said, whether it was truthful or lies, and then read between the lines and come up with the full story.
Melissa is now taking all the lessons she's learned from her experience with her father and sharing them with other family and friends of serial killers in her new podcast, Life After Happy Face.
I took a really horrible, horrific experience and I flipped it around for my betterment and for my family's betterment. I've grown. I have made a career in true crime, but I was a survivor of true crime. I slept near you in the room that you murdered your victims. And I have these experiences that will live with me for the rest of my life, and I'm going to use them in a way that's meaningful to me.
Thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and share with your friends. I'm Bukia Lekbede, and I'll see you guys next time. Stay healthy, deep divers. Check out our hit video, The 6 Reasons Why People Enjoy True Crime Stories.